All right. Welcome to another episode of the DSL podcast. I'm your host, Dave Cole, and today our guest is Gaia Bellone. Did I pronounce that correctly, Gaia?
Perfect, Dave.
Thank
Very,
you.
very
Yes. She hails from Italy, but she currently works at KeyBank as the head of data science. She also spent 7 years at Chase, and prior to that, she got her PhD in statistics from Carnegie Mellon. Welcome to the DSL podcast, Gaia.
Thank you, Dave. I'm super excited to be with you today.
Great, great to have you here. I think there's three topics that we'll be talking about today. The first is something I know that is a passion of yours. Was talking about know your data. So obviously data is in the name in terms of data science, and it is sort of the material that we data scientists need in order to build our models. It is a key material, and we're going to talk about like tips and tricks in terms of knowing your data and how important it is, and sort of your philosophy with your team, and building out that skill. The second thing we're going to talk about is sort of where to begin with regards to data science. So I think I know you're passionate about, teaching is a passion of yours and getting folks up to speed on data science. I'd love to hear from you on your approach to that. And then last but not least, you hail from Italy, and you've been working in the States for a number of years. We'd love to talk about just sort of the international differences in working in data science in Italy, and then some of the differences and what we can learn from our Italian friends in terms of building out a data science practice. So without further ado, let's talk about know your data. So you have a PhD in statistics, but I know in sort of preparation for this podcast, you sort of have a refreshing philosophy when it comes to data science. Talk about your sort of your emphasis on knowing data. Like, what does that mean?
Sure. So, first of all, when we talk about data science, we really are talking about the famous unicorn, the person that knows a lot about statistics and knows
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit about computing, not as much as the machine learning engineers, but getting close, and then knows a lot about the business. And when you know a lot about the business, actually what you need to know, it's a lot about the data that describe the
Mm-hmm.
business and that can help a business, or not just a business, any kind of field that you're working with to thrive or solve the problem that are over there. So whenever one of my data scientists get a project or wants to work on a project, and then if they come to me with just saying, I want to apply this or that model, I'm not even listening. I swear, I'm like, I don't care what are you talking about. That can be a monkey. At this
Right,
point,
right.
a monkey can write 10 different models and come up with an answer that makes sense. The
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I want from you is talking to me about the data and why you think that this data would be useful to solve the problem that you are trying to solve. Talk to me about the business problem. Actually, first talk to me about the business.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me who you're going to work with, what we are talking about, what we are trying to solve, which kind of data are really relevant for that specific field. And then we can start to talk about how to have fun to run whatever fancy models we want to run. But it's really, there are plenty of tools now that you can run 10 models at one time, and it's going to give you a wonderful answer. But
Right.
it would be total crap unless you understand the data and the assumption that your data and your problem and the field are going to suggest you, and then you can check it with your results to make sure
Right.
that you're not incurring in the usually problem that you have when you don't understand your data first.
Right. So there's some, uh, in terms of building out building a model, right? There's
Mhm.
sort of various phases in sort of any data science project. And one of the first phases you have is this EDA, right? Exploratory
Yeah.
data analysis. And are you basically saying that like before you come talk to me about what project you're working on, not only do you need to understand, the business problem you're trying to solve, but like I want you to have done some of that EDA, right?
Yeah.
Before you come talk to me. And like what is that? What is like a great sort of exploratory data analysis? Like what does that look like to you? Is it like a visualization? Is it something like some formal document, or is it just like you have looked over the data, you just have some frame of reference
Sure.
before talking to you?
So I take all of these as opportunity to train my people to talk about what they're doing. And one of the problems that analysts or technical people have, it's really explaining what they're doing. Unless you're able to explain what you're doing, you can do a great job. Nobody's ever going to use it. So the value is still zero, right?
Right.
So I kind of train them in already, for example, building decks. Visualize, build a story. Talk to me about the data as a story. Start with a business problem. Talk to me why this data is relevant, how it looks like, which kind of issue they have, how you're going to treat it. And then we can talk about the rest. This way, it's really on one side a learning moment. First of all, it forces you to really learn about the problem. Then it forces you also to become an expert in it. And then you become an expert in talking about it. And then your business partners are going to listen to you because they are going to feel that you are with them. It's not that you're just the crazy data scientist that run fancy tools but has no idea about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You become a strategic partners because this is supposed to be the data science role.
Yeah, I think there's some, philosophies on. Well, I've spoken before to other guests who have even moved into strategy, like come from a data science role into like a strategy role, because just through data they have come that close, to the business, to really truly understanding it, that they've actually moved into a little bit more of a strategic role. And I think if you play it right and you really sort of lean into what you're saying, Gaia, which is like really understanding the business and understanding the data, there's so much you can learn about the business that even the business, folks who are not data scientists don't even know about, right?
Yeah,
And
you are actually going to be the expert and they're going to come to you. And for example, the way I usually structure my business, I have a team that does data-driven strategies, which means that they look into data to build the long-term strategy for the business that are big enough for involving the rest of the team to dedicate resources to solve that problem, but also involve all the other partners that need to support that specific opportunities. So it's really, we are becoming strategic partners from the very beginning to find the next big thing for the business or the field that you're working with every single time.
Yeah, that's also another great point, which is you need not always start with some business idea. There should be, like, I think what you're saying is there should be like a healthy mix of some amount of like R&D, some amount of this, work that research that your data science team is doing to kind of come up with projects and actually propose those to maybe folks on the business side, not always just sort of take orders, so to speak, to build out projects.
Yeah.
What if you had to? I'm just curious, if you had to guess at in terms of your team in, I don't know, last 12 months, like what percentage of the projects were sort of generated by the business side versus which were like your team sort of came up with on their own? What would that be?
So I would say 15 from the business and 85 from ours. And mostly
Really?
because,
Wow.
well, the business doesn't really know what is the best tool that they would need to solve something. So often when they come to us is with problems that really are not well suited for a team like mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I send them more to team like business analytics, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that they can give you in 2 weeks. You don't need.
So it'd be like more descriptive, like a dashboard or something like that.
Yeah, they don't need us for customer profile. They don't need us to know, oh, can you give me a picture of the sales for the last month? You don't need me for that.
Yeah.
It's not the best way to use our expertise. But another point that I always make with my team is like, you don't just look at the data. You really need to know what we are talking about. For example, I'm in banking, right? But I need to know about economics. I need to know about economics life cycle. I need to know, for example, now we are in a recession, what we are going to expect from the recession so that we can start to look at the data and what the data can help us to support our business during a recession period. What is the shape of the curve? So it's not just being a data scientist. You need to be an expert in life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, certainly if you're in a bank, like, economics and understanding macro trends and things like that, certainly seems like
they can infer you, they can tell you what you should look at in the data to actually help the business to thrive. Similar thing if you are in the medical field, right? you have to understand what is going on in the medical field to coming up with a good idea
Sure.
what you should work on.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And I'm curious, when if I were on your team and I were
Mhm.
building out a great deck for you, and that's what it sounds like, you prefer is somebody to actually build out a deck that proposes like a project and that walks through, the data. Like what is like? Can you go one level deeper? Like, what does that deck look like? What are some of the the slides that like have to be in there for you to be able to sort of bless the project so that it moves to the next phase?
Sure. The first one is really the executive summary. Tell me
Yeah.
why we are here. Grab my attention. It's
Hmm.
really, for this, I'm saying it's a teaching moment because, of course, they could just show me plot and stuff. I would get it. I did their job. I know what they're talking about. But I'm not training them for myself. I'm
Right.
training them to get better for themselves and be able to be independent and grow. That's my role, right?
Hmm.
So the first thing that I really want for them is learning how to write an executive summary so that they can grab my attention. And the first thing that they had to convince me, I deserve your time. You should be
Right.
here and listen to me.
The so
That's the
what?
first
Yeah.
thing that they need to talk to me about. It's
Right.
not for me, of course. I know that they are super valuable, but unfortunately, when you talk to business partner, they are pulled in so many directions, and it's hard for them from the very beginning, especially if you go in the details, like often we do, to say why I should be here now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
help your audience to be focused.
And
Uh,
what is a great way to grab the audience? Is it ROI? Is it like, hey, if we do this project, I think we can cut costs by this much, or there's a revenue opportunity here.
Usually on the business side, that's one of the main opportunity. Talk about volume, talk about dollar volume, talk about incremental,
Hmm.
compare to what you have done before, what is available. So numbers that they are common in their language and they are usually their performance are based on.
Hmm. Hmm.
Really build everything around your audience. You can we have plenty of brainstorming session internally, which is just gig out, totally
Right.
fun for
Right. Right.
us,
Right. Yeah.
but we need to be prepared that when we talk outside it needs to be around the audience,
So
otherwise
this is a yeah. So this is a deck, right? That has this executive summary, but it's a deck. I assume that you're telling your team, hey, if this is great, and and once we're sort of done with version 2, version 3 of this deck, we're going to forward this onto the business and propose this as a project like that.
yeah,
Like yeah. So
that's the
it
idea.
needs to be consumable not just by me who understands the data science and the the details made the nitty gritty and the geeking out part of the project, but also it needs to to speak to our business counterparts, right? So it needs to have that executive summary. What else do you think it needs to have here?
Usually talk, for example, in our case, talk about your customers or talk about the volumes. Show why you came to that conclusion.
Hmm.
They need your help. Okay, they see a conclusion, they get excited. There is value in there. Now explain to them why that is true. Of course, with data. We don't use gut feeling. We are
Right.
scientists first, right?
Yep. Yep.
So use that to really share with them why they should believe in what you are saying. That's the second part. And that's a lot descriptive. You can use plots, you can use tables, try to avoid tables often they are too confusing. It depends from your audience. Try to
Sure.
learn who you're going to talk to and what they like to hear, but make it digestible for them. Explain to them why you got to that conclusion. And
Right.
then the modeling part, often they don't care, right? I know we love to explain it and say how hard it was, how many iterations you went through. They do not care. It's very
Yeah.
sad,
Yeah.
but that part, unfortunately, we cannot really make it a selling point. What funny though, they do care because they think that they have an understanding. Oh, I'm sure they have an understanding
Sure.
of it. Not that they think, but they do often care what was relevant,
Yes.
because that's a kind of a sanity check. Anyway, you work with the business in the very beginning to understand which kind of data is usually relevant in their problem. You don't work alone. You work
Right.
side by side with them, especially at the very beginning. But then you need their sanity check, given that they are still the expert. my conclusion and what the data that seems relevant doesn't make sense to you, or we could have a problem of overfitting, or a problem that as soon as they change the data, nothing works anymore.
Right.
So
So
it's really,
explainability, right? Not just in terms
Mhm.
of the project, but explainability of the model itself, right, is critical, because in order to sort of win over hearts and minds and get past the sanity check moment with your business counterparts, you need, the models, the features that are highly correlated with your dependent variable, what have you, they need to be sort of sanity checked. So I'm curious, like, do you think that you may tend to like your team may tend to shy away from types of models that maybe are just inherently more difficult to explain, like a little bit more of, maybe a deep learning model that's a little bit more black box? Do you find that that's maybe a challenge?
no, I think at least in my team, they love challenges. So they're really trying to find a better way to leverage a more advanced technique
Hmm.
without losing the opportunity to properly discuss with the business about the results.
Yeah.
So
So that
instead of shying away, oh my God, it's going to be too hard, they are so excited and so geeky that they really want to make it work. And on one side, they want to show that you have better performance that is worth the extra step. One thing that I often ask to my team is please do, when you build something like that, especially on the modeling, when you get to the modeling part, do the simplest one.
yeah.
And then feel free to use whatever you want, I'm fine. But we need to prove that the extra work that would take us to really go through the validation part of something more complex is worth it. Worth
Yeah.
it, your time, not mine. It's your time that could be used somewhere else instead.
That's great. That's great advice. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in there. I think a lot of good sort of best practices. I think it sounds to me too. I'm sort of reading between the lines here, Gaia, but like your role is, not just to help out with the sort of the geeky parts, but also to help just guide your data scientists to make sure that they understand the business problems, to make sure that they understand, the impact that they're having. And I've found this too, and I'm sure you have as well, that if you can explain a fairly complex thing and sort of dumb it down, it's actually a very hard thing to do, and it's a skill
Mhm.
that you sort of have to learn from. And I imagine learning from you, and eventually when you are able to routinely explain very difficult things and to simplify them, I've always found that, like, I learn a lot from that process, right? I learn
Mhm.
sometimes, like, gosh, I really don't understand this as well as I thought I did. I might have to research this. So I think that's a really, really important skill, right?
Yeah,
Especially in this
definitely.
world of, like, I think data science has kind of moved beyond it's sort of become more and more accepted, right? It's become
Mhm.
this field and this necessary role that you need to have within your organization. But you need to make sure that it's always driving value that is relatable to the business, the business side. So if you cannot do that, it could run the risk of the data science team shrinking. Hopefully not, but anyway, so that's
Yeah.
really interesting. Maybe we could switch gears and talk a little bit. I mean, clearly your passion for training
Mhm.
and providing guidance, as not just like a manager but also from a data science perspective, is coming through. I mean, I'm just hearing it in your answers. What sort of advice do you have for other DSLs out there who or maybe are trying to build great data scientists, and trying to get maybe some folks started in the world of data science as a way of building out their team, instead of just hiring people straight out of college, these days, who have a degree in data science or a related field?
So training is very important. And it's twofold. On one side, the leadership or whoever build the training need to be a practitioner, right? So that you know that the training is going to be effective. On the other side, the leadership need to really support the training moment. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot expect that the training is going to be an afterthought unless you empower your people to be trained. They're not going to do it. They're going to always say, well, I need to work versus I need to train. You need to give them the opportunity of actually taking training. One thing that we have done in my team, we actually put the training as part of the performance review so
Mm-hmm.
that people would feel not compelled, but it was like, okay, I'm spending time on something that matters for my career and is included in my career path.
Right.
Often the companies, they give you training, but they don't really make it part of your career path. You take it, you don't take it, your issue, your problem. If you want your team to grow and to keep up with the skills, you have to give them the chance to do it. You have to give them the chance to make that part also part of their career path.
Right.
When they start from the very beginning, if they're coming out, for example, out of school, one thing that I often do, and actually I did it myself when I joined JP Morgan Chase right out of graduate school, where my thesis actually was on DNA sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
I had an undergraduate degree in economics, so it's not a bank like finance and bank, and in quantitative finance. So it's not that everything was new, but it was 5 years before in a different country. So
Right.
so I was like, okay, well, how do I learn this, and how do I learn this fast enough? How do I understand what does it mean to be a data scientist, or at the time we were called modelers,
Mm-hmm.
in the pretty much biggest bank, for sure,
Right.
in the United States, and in home lending. And what I did over there was I asked for a meeting with everybody on the team. I started just with the teammates, and I asked them to share with me a deck or a full analysis that they already have done before. So completely done work. They didn't need to do anything extra. Just walk me through, so I would have an idea which kind of work the whole team was doing, and also what is the expectation in delivering that work.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second piece, it was really a little bit more of a open discussion, maybe around the project that they were working really at the moment, but still not trying to take time off of their day, not asking to prepare anything new. It was really for me to have a very quick overview of what everybody was doing, how that needs to be presented, what kind of work our kind of team was going to be asked to do.
Yeah.
And it was also a very, very good way to meeting with everybody.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great piece of advice, right? So if you're joining a data science team as, a practitioner for the first time, carving out, telling your manager, hey, I'd love to sit down with like each data scientist and just get a little bit of a sense of
Mm-hmm.
a completed project they've worked on, or maybe what they're working on right now, just to get a sense of sort of the expectation. I imagine I'm also going to learn, the business challenges we're solving, get an idea of what sort of data, how we get models in production. You're going to learn a lot, right, by actually, rolling up your sleeves and talking to each, individual or team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what project they've done. So that's a great piece of advice.
And
Um,
you get also all the decks afterwards, so you would have all the time to study the decks and take your time, because anyway it's hard in the very beginning. It's so much new information that you
right.
can digest and then go back and maybe ask more questions. And the same kind of tactic, you can just use it to expand your network and learn more about what happens outside your team. And that can be useful just because for being a better contributor to the whole business. The more you know, the better it is, of
Yeah.
course. And on the other side, can open new doors, and you
Yeah.
learn that actually you care for something different, and you could just end up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know that people love they spend a lot of time at their job, and they're proud of, most people are proud of what they do, right? And
Mhm.
they want to show it off, and they want to
Yeah.
say like, yeah, this is and it's also a great way to like make connections, as you mentioned, and network and
Yeah.
and get to know your teammates. And then the other piece of advice, you were saying is like, hey, really advocate for your team, to carve out time for training. Like what sort of time do you allocate? You mentioned that you sort of you OKR it, or you have it as part of your performance route. Like what is sort of a reasonable amount of time, do you think, for a data scientist? What percentage of their time should be focused on like sort of training?
Sure, it depends a lot, right? We are going through, for example, a cloud migration, right?
Yeah.
Then we know that the team needs more time for training. We look at the book of work. We identify the right training that the team should be doing, and then we ask to the team usually to take one course. This is how we did it also for other training. For example, when we moved to open source, take one class, and then let's discuss how much time you thought you had to spend to really digest it. And then we can create a path and say, okay, for learning, for example, for going through this full track that I think it's mandatory for you to really have solid base for Python coding, for example, and I want for you to be able to do it in 12 months, then this is the amount of time that I think you should be able to spend. But it's really done with the person. It's not done just by us closing a box, not thinking about how long it takes for a person to really digest that material. It's they have to do it. If you pretty much make them tell you how long it's going to take, they will really dedicate the time and they will feel they were part of the decision, so they are going to actually do it. If you just enforce it, it could become a much, much harder conversation. Then they would fight against it, mostly because, not for bad things, it's like they also have a day job, right?
Yep.
And first of all, we are trying to make the training part of the day job with this work, right? But at the same time, for them, it's always a negotiation. Should I finish my day job? Should I go to the training?
Yeah.
Helping them to be part of the discussion and the decision in how much it would take, help them that really to commit better and to find the right balance.
Yeah. And I think bringing them into the process, like you said, like sitting down with them and saying like, hey, what's on your plate? Here's how much, here's what I would like for you, years from now, I'd like you to be at this level of in terms of being a Python developer. And this is what I, think it's going to take to get there. Like how much time do you think you need? Is 12 months reasonable? Maybe they can do it in 6 months. I don't know. Like, I think that's always great advice for almost anything. And then the second thing I heard too is that like, hey, hey Dave, it's not, you can't always just say, 10% of your time or 20% of your time should be dedicated to training. There's certain events that might kick that off. Like, so a move from maybe proprietary, tools that your team may have been using to open source might be an event. And then another event is like, hey, we're moving to the cloud, right? So we're moving from sort of an on-prem type environment and into the cloud, and there's a lot of services in the cloud that the team will need to be expert in. There's sort of a new way of thinking, etc. I feel like there's a whole other podcast episode on like a cloud moving into the cloud. As a data science team.
So many stories for you, Dave, over there. So many stories.
Is there anything you could share, like short, like a couple? I feel like you need to come back on because that's a fascinating topic. Is there anything that like any sort of watch items for you? Anything that or maybe things that are sort of an eye opening as you've gone through this process?
It's not really an eye opening for me, but I discovered that it's an eye opening for a lot of people inside corporation. Cloud costs money, and it's a very different way of manage cost. And you need to start to have the people that usually are just users of compute resources to start to think in a completely different way. Now, the problem with compute is not just capacity, which already a lot of people don't think about it. They just run their processes, never think what's going on. Now you don't have anymore a problem of capacity. Now you have a problem of cost. That's a much harder problem to deal with because then you are finance that is going to breathe on your neck.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of an opportunity, though, for analytics community and teams to grow internally because they start to have a broader view of the way they operate. Instead of just focusing on solving the problem, they start to see actually how many things need to be included and considered whenever they are working on a problem. And one of these becomes, what is the right tool that I should use? How much it should cost? Yep. And then there is a huge discussion, which still, I think it's a very, let's call it a Pandora box that should be open at some point. Who should pay for it?
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
How the new cost model should really look like. Should we just look back and just making sure that people are considering cost, or you want to put those costs on the budget of an analytics community, or
Mhm.
you want for these costs to be put on the budget of the final user of the output, which is the business.
Right.
I heard many different stories around there. I think we are not.
There's
Nobody
no,
really knows.
yeah.
Nobody really knows.
I think clearly the business should pay for it. That's my 2 cents here at the DSL podcast. That's the obvious answer. But I think when it comes to moving to the cloud, I think the my perspective here is that the costs are just are clearer. It should be more clear, right? Because sort of time is money in the cloud, right? But it's not like the tools that you were using in the past, whether it was on your laptop or whatever, didn't cost anything. I mean, they did, right? They were not as easy to quantify. I think there was, you might have bought some software 5 years ago that you're still using today. Maybe you're paying 10% or whatever per year, or whatever it is. But now it's like way just in your face, and it can certainly create challenges and makes that ROI conversation that we sort of started the episode with just that much more important. I think when you're putting, if you're cutting costs and then you got to compare it against the time it takes to train your model, the time it takes to do this project. I mean, obviously you should be saving more than it costs to build a model. But yeah, so I think those conversations are now starting to be had, thanks to the cloud, and it's great that you're going through that. I did want to touch on sort of you grew up in Italy, you worked there for a period of time, and then you came over here. Is there anything, if you're a DSL and you have somebody who's come from a foreign land, and you're living in the U.S., or maybe not, maybe this is this podcast is not relegated to just folks in the U.S., but like how have you sort of seen sort of the differences from a culture perspective?
So the hardest difference, especially if you're coming from Italy, it's vacation time. We have so many days off in Italy that you can really enjoy.
How much vacation do you get in Italy? I'm curious.
Well,
Like,
I
what's
think that
normal?
you get up to 6 weeks, but then we have a lot of holidays,
Right.
right? So you have a lot of breaks, which is
6
really
weeks.
not common in the US, which actually it was a tragic for me also when I came over to graduate school, that you start in them August and then you don't breathe until December. And then you give
Yeah.
me a
Yeah.
month off. I'm like, I don't care. I'm dead already. I'm not going to enjoy
Yeah.
that month, which is really, I think, a cultural difference from that point of view. In banking, at least, we have not a bad number of weeks off. There are definitely other industries that are much, much stricter, but I kind of miss it. How many
Yeah.
days I had on
Yeah.
others?
I love vacation with the best of them, and I think you need to recharge, right? You need to recharge.
Mhm.
Like if you're just working, constantly, I think you lose the freshness. You learn you lose that fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Some of my best work was mentally sitting on a beach somewhere and thinking, oh man, I should probably do that when I get back. I try not to think too much about work, when I'm on vacation, but sometimes these things just pop in, right?
Yeah,
From
as I
a so,
said, my best ideas, I think, they came to me while I was walking my dog.
yeah, yeah. I think that's too something that folks should look for too, right? Is people who are really passionate and live and breathe this stuff. I mean, yes,
Mhm.
you want time to for yourself and with your family and what have you, and walking your dog. But like, you also want to hire people, I think, data scientists who really are passionate what they do. And they're thinking
Yeah.
about these problems morning, noon, and night. Those are the types of people that are going to be key to your business. But is there anything else to say between, Italy and the US at least?
Yeah, no, I think we do have differences, especially about opportunities that you have in this country. And definitely the data science community and the use of data science side, business or corporation or industries in general, it's a way more developed over here than in Italy. Fun fact, when I talked to my advisor when I was in college in Italy, and I was joking, and I told him, because he was like, okay, what do you want to do next? do you want help to find a job? And I was joking. I worked and studied at the same time. So I was kind of tired of it. And I was like, can I be paid to study? And it was like, yeah, if you go to the US, that's the only place that you can do that through a PhD, but it's also worth it because, of course, a PhD also almost kills you. Like, it's not a walk in the park.
Right.
I still wonder why I did it.
Yeah.
And how I finished it. That's another big question, and nobody knows. But really, the only country, well, based on my experience, I don't want to say the only country, but the US really values what you can learn. And really, at this point, probably is the place that values the most something like data science.
Yeah.
And the reason why I picked it when I picked it is just because I didn't want to pick any field. I was like, I want just a very good bag of tools so that is good. And then I can choose wherever I want. Because I was already like my undergraduate degree thesis in Italy, you need a thesis for that as well. It was in option pricing, where I got super excited about stochastic calculus and stochastic processes. And I felt, oh my God, I don't think I know enough. Like, I don't know enough that I can solve or even find a completely new problem to solve by myself. So that's one of the reasons why I went into statistics, but I don't think I would have had the same kind of chance if I was in Italy. Like, I could have gone to the PhD in Italy. That wasn't a problem, but the PhD in Italy, it's very focused on theoretical. And the PhD over here, I had the opportunity. You can choose, of course. Yeah. You can be theoretical, but also over here, I had the opportunity to work from the get-go with actual client and project that really makes you excited about what you can solve with it. Yeah. And then you really have the opportunity to enter the work environment and keep doing what you love, which in Italy most likely would have been much harder to be using all the geeky stuff that I was learning on a day-to-day basis to solve real life problems, which is, I think, what data scientist really likes to do.
Yeah, I think if you're out there and you're wondering what PhD to get or what advanced degree or any degree to get, I think you're right. Like I never thought about it that way, but like data science and by extension statistics is so universal. It really can be applied to almost any industry, right? And I think you've shown that. I mean, you started in DNA sequencing and then you magically transitioned over into banking, right? And seamlessly, and it's clearly worked out quite well. So with that, thank you so much, Gaia, for joining me on the DSL podcast. I had an absolute blast. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
It was a lot of fun. I always love to be able to share my experience. Hopefully it's going to be helpful to somebody. And of course, if there is anybody that have any extra question, you can ask Dave and Dave can let me know.
Yeah. Or just, I assume people can reach out to your LinkedIn maybe and get you that way or if you're on social media. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, totally. Through LinkedIn, they can find me. I'm pretty rare. My first name, last name, it's a pretty unique combination.
Gaia Bellone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Gaia, and arrivederci.
Ciao.
Ciao.